Good afternoon, everyone. I see Councillor Hickey. There's Councillor Norton. Perhaps if the committee could turn their cameras on, that would help you pop up on my screen. I think I see Councillor Radwin. And just looking for the mayor. Perfect.
Great.
It's okay. It's 1:16 p.m. and I will call the June 28th session of the City of St. John Finance Committee to order. And the first item we have is item 2.1, which is the minutes of May 31st. If I could have somebody move the minutes of May 31st. Your worship, a seconder, Councillor Norton. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Contrary minded, carried. Item 3 is approval of the agenda, which has been circulated. I have a motion to approve the agenda, your worship, and Councillor Radwin. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Contrary minded. The agenda is carried. Item 4, I'll ask for a disclosure of conflict of interest, if there are any. Seeing none, we'll move on. There are no items on our consent agenda, which takes us to business matters. Item 6.1, the Deloitte audit results. Controller Levine, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan, and to members of the Finance Committee. I am pleased to have our auditors from Deloitte here today to provide an overview of their audit report for the city's 2022 consolidated financial statements. Based on the work performed by our auditors, we see no reason why we will not have another clean audit this year, and I will provide an overview of our consolidated statements shortly after the presentation from our auditors. With that, I'd like to introduce Steve Lund, who is our lead and partner with Deloitte. And over to you, Steve.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Lund, managing partner for Deloitte in New Brunswick, and I am the signatory on your audit report. Just in case there's some folks that I don't know, in my spare time, I'm also on the board of CPA New Brunswick, and I'll be the incoming chair for CPA Atlantic as well. I'm joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Jeremy Mallet and Elena Gidney, who would be no stranger to you folks. They'll walk you through a document in a moment that we label as audit results. And really, this is a document that's designed to communicate all the matters that you'd expect to see in order to feel confident approving a set of financial statements. Without spoiling the moral of the story too much, I can confirm that the audit is in fact complete and it will be a clean audit report. So with that, folks, I'll turn it over to Jeremy to walk us through the details. As always, feel free to interrupt throughout with questions, or if you want to save it to the end, we're easy either way. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve. Elena is going to share our document on the screen so that we have it ready for everyone to follow along. Excellent, thank you. So we'll go right to the executive summary, Elena. So as Steve said, my name is Jeremy Mallet. I'm the senior manager on the audit. I have been with Deloitte and I guess with the city since we first won it over quite a few years ago now. I guess it's been a while, so it's been a great period that working together over the last few years. So as you can see here in the audit scope, in terms of engagement, we did perform an audit in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, and our audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, so no changes there for prior year. The master service agreement was signed by management and was in agreement with our proposal that was put through quite a few years ago and approved. Our significant risks, Lena's going to talk about those in just a few minutes, related to management override of controls and presumed fraud risk relating to revenue recognition for property taxes, unconditional grants, and other revenue. These are both what we call presumed fraud risks, so they're inherent in all of our audits that we do. They are not specific to the City of St. John, and Elena will go through that in detail. As for the uncorrected misstatements, our materiality for the current year was set at $6.4 million. So this is the threshold within which errors could not accumulate to a higher number than 6.4 million. We would, however, report to this committee any errors above $320,000. So it's not, if there's a $5 million error, for example, we would be reporting it to this committee, but we do set that threshold at $320,000 for reporting. And there is one uncorrected misstatement that totals $613,252, and we will go through details of that in just a few minutes. Outstanding matters and next steps. So these are standard at this point in the process. Just a few outstanding items that we need. So receipt of legal letters, completion of subsequent event receipt procedures, approval of the statements as presented, final review. So nothing outstanding, nothing out of the ordinary, and everything that we would expect at this point. Go to the next page. Going concern, so management has completed its assessment of the ability of the city to continue as going concern, and we agree with that. There's no concerns there. And then no restrictions have been placed in the scope of our audit, and as Steve said, we will be issuing a clean audit opinion for the current year. You, Elena?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Elena Gidney. I'm a manager out of the St. John office. I think this is my first time attending this meeting, but I have been involved with the audit for a number of years now. So as Jeremy mentioned, I'm going to go through the significant risks quickly. So the first one is management override of controls. And as Jeremy had mentioned, this is present in all of our entities. And it's just the risk of fraud by those charged with governance. So to test this or analyze this, we did discuss fraud with management. We asked the finance committee for their views about the risk of fraud and whether they know of any actual or suspected fraud affecting the city. I will pause here just to confirm that there are no instances of fraud or suspected fraud that we should be made aware of. Since I can't see anyone, I'll take silence as good news. So if I move forward, we did test a sample of journal entries made throughout the period, as well as adjustments made at the end of the reporting period. We evaluated the business rationale for any significant unusual transactions, and through our procedures, we did obtain sufficient audit evidence to conclude that there were no material misstatements. The second risk is one that you would have seen in the past. So this is the risk of fraud on revenue recognition for property taxes, unconditional grants, and other revenue. So we evaluated the revenue transactions, and we concluded that the significant risk is that revenue may have been recorded in the correct period. So to evaluate this, we did test internal controls. We confirmed balances with third parties when possible to ensure that the revenue recorded was appropriate. When it was not possible to do confirmations, we did a detailed test of the revenue streams and ensured that the proper revenue recognition criteria were met and that the transactions were recorded in the proper period. We did conclude that the internal controls were designed and implemented appropriately. And that one error that we noted on the executive summary will be discussed further in the report. So back to you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Any questions on the significant risks? Okay, hearing none. At any point, feel free to stop us. So this next section here talks about the significant accounting policy judgments and estimates that are included on the financial statements. These are consistent year over year. So we have allowance for doubtful accounts, tangible capital assets, which includes the useful life and the amortization and the impairment of those TCA items, accounts payable accruals, and assumptions related to pension plans. These are all relevant and would be material amounts within the financial statements, and so we just include this as part of our reporting to you. And again, there are no changes year over year. Next section, Appendix 1, talks about the requirement that we have to this audit committee or this finance committee in order to complete your requirement as committee members. So what we have is the required communication on the left, and then on the right is where we would communicate these items. So whether it's in the master service agreement, through this meeting, in some cases, financial statements. So there's all kinds of different places. So I won't go through this line by line, but just know that we are discharging our duties as auditors with regards to the required communications. Appendix 2 talks through the group audit aspect, the fact that we are a group audit. Over the years, this table has changed significantly. Obviously, we've had the first four, I guess, for quite a few years, and throughout the years, we've accumulated a few more of the ABCs that are part of the city, and so the only one that we do not currently complete the work on, as you can tell, is Lord Beaverbrook Rink, which is a non-significant component, and it's completed by Ash Casey Mills. The other non-significant components would be the Trade and Convention Center, the Aquatic Center, and the Free Public Library. Just significance in the sense of both qualitative and quantitative factors. Appendix 3 is a required communication as well. It's new and revised accounting and auditing standards that are coming out. We will work with management to make sure that we tackle these early on. There will be some impacts related mainly to asset retirement obligations that are going to be that may have an effect, but it's not expected to be an overly material adjustment. It's simply that we need to look at it, and we will look at it sooner than later with management. Appendix 4 is simply our boilerplate resources that we have in different areas that we do serve our people. So again, I won't dwell any time here, but it is some light reading for your evenings if you've got some time. And finally is our draft management representation letter. So this letter will be signed by Kevin Fudge, and it relates to management's representing the fact that they have completed all of the listed items within their duty as management. So again, I won't go through this line by line, but I will highlight at the end the last page that we did talk about this misstatement during the executive summary, and so I wanted to highlight it here. So this is another example of Kevin Fudge will be kind of signing off on this as an uncorrected error, and it relates to government transfer funding received in 2021 but not recognized until 2022. So it's simply a timing error. It does not have an impact on the operating surplus or deficit. It's simply a timing difference from work related to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, which is a capital budget project that was obtained and earned in 2021, but was not recorded until 2022. So simply a timing difference. Okay, that's it for our presentation. Are there any questions for myself, Steve, or Lena?
Thanks, Jeremy. Over to the committee. Committee satisfied? Presentation? Okay, we will have an opportunity in a little bit to meet in camera should anything pop up. Okay, thanks. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to share my screen for a quick overview of the 2022 audit statements. Perfect. Everybody see my screen okay?
We can see it, Craig. Just before you get started,
Sure.
Just looking as separate items on the agenda. Did you want to do this first, and then we'll deal with the audit in a motion, or do this part first?
We do this part first, and then we can do the motion and then have the in camera if that works.
Nope, that works for me. Thank you.
So thank you, Chair Sullivan, and to members of the Finance Committee. I am pleased to present an overview of the 2022 consolidated audited statements. I first would like to thank our entire finance team, particularly Cindy Blizzard, Andrew, and Viril Parikh for their work, along with our auditors from Deloitte. It is truly a team effort to consolidate 12 entities into one. As the committee just heard from the auditors, the annual financial audit is complete. The audit opinion of the financial statements is clean. The financial statements present fairly in all material respects, and the financial position of the city is in accordance with public sector accounting standards. As the committee is aware of, our annual budgets are legislated under the New Brunswick Local Governance Act. I won't go through each of these in detail, but under the Local Governance Act, the city cannot own or operate a corporation for the purposes of making a profit, and that both the general and utility fund has to have a balanced budget annually. This slide sets out an overview of the public sector accounting standards, which we are required to follow for reporting purposes. Again, highlighting the fact that the city consolidates 12 entities to present one set of financial statements. The consolidation process is very complex. That takes the general fund and the utility operating results and add in other funds and ABCs. There are changes in accounting and presentation of these numbers. We are required to eliminate any interfund entries, which would be revenue for one entity and expense for another entity. And the financial terms are very different. The city's requirement of a balanced budget is not based on these financial statements. Here is a summary of the major accounting differences. I won't go through each of these, but a few I will highlight under the general fund and the utility fund is that capital costs are expensed where they are amortized under consolidated financial statements. We have reserve funds that we use to transfer to and from for various reasons. However, under consolidated reporting, reserve balances must be eliminated. Here's a list of entities that we have consolidated and are included in our financial statements. One of the major changes is the Canada Games Foundation is no longer consolidated due to amendments to the foundation's letters, patent, and bylaws that were done in 2022. These amendments effectively removed any connection with the city. Therefore, there is no longer a requirement to consolidate with the city. I will speak about the financial adjustment done in 2022 to remove this entity from the city's consolidated statements in a later slide. So let's get into the consolidated financial statements. If we take a look at our statement of financial position, or what could be considered a balance sheet, it really tells our story. It is more than just numbers. The city's health continues to improve. The long-term financial plan is working. Debt continues to decrease, and infrastructure deficit continues to be a critical financial indicator. Here's a snapshot of our consolidated net debt. We have gone from a high of over $300 million in 2018 to a balance of just over $97 million in 2022. For the general fund long-term debt, the 2022 ending balance is just over $90 million, which is a 24.28% reduction, or 29.63% reduction since a high of 2014. For the utility fund, the debt balance is $75.61 million at the end of 2022, which is a reduction of 29.63. I misquoted the previous slide, from that high of $107 million in 2017. I would also like to note that by the end of 2023, the utility fund will be back at 2014 debt levels. Another positive note is our financial health continues to improve, ending with just over $37.5 million in our operating and capital reserves. We continue to focus on our infrastructure deficit. Our annual amortization costs changed little year over year compared to our annual investment of just over 34 point some million in new assets. So we're amortizing just slightly more than we are replacing. I would now like to review our operating and annual surplus. When we compare the year over year annual surplus, we are around 4.2 million less than last year, partially due to less actuarial gains in St. John Energy, as well as the disposal of the Canada Gains Foundation that is no longer being consolidated with our statements. These expenses were partially offset with positive actuarial results in post-employment benefits. As you can see, there was a large increase in government transfers for capital projects. The majority is timing as projects got well underway in 2022 and the city received subsequent funding for these projects. So the overall surplus was just over $54 million, but taking into consideration income from energy service was $21.8 million, which is a non-cash accounting entry. We also had a positive non-cash actuarial adjustment in post-employments, largely to do with the pension liability of approximately $20 million. And again, this is a non-cash accounting entry. These two gains were partially offset with recording the disposal of $8.7 million with the Canada Gains Foundation is no longer consolidated. Again, non-cash. And as I mentioned in the last slide, government transfers for capital contributed to almost $20 million to the annual surplus. And listed on this slide are just some of the funding streams we received in 2022. And lastly, if anybody wants to see our actual budgeted results, refer to note 23 in the financial statements. It provides the general and utility fund results before any adjustments for PSAV reporting purposes. And I'm just going to talk quickly about our actual general fund and utility fund results. This slide shows our actual general fund operating results for 2022, which was a surplus of just over $2.3 million. However, that includes a non-cash actuarial adjustment related to post-employment benefits, which leaves us an operating deficit of just over $130,000. On this slide is a breakdown of the revenue surplus in 2022, and this aligns with what staff presented to Finance Committee in March. Here's just a quick snapshot of overall expenditures. For the general fund, salaries and benefits positive due to the actuarial adjustment. Goods and services largely due to fuel costs, insurance, and general cost of goods and services, along with more provincial road work being done in 22 that was offset with additional DTI revenue. Fiscal charges variance is largely due to additional transfer to our reserves. Overall results for St. John Water resulted in a $266,000 surplus. And again, these results align to what was presented to the Finance Committee in March. So with that, it is recommended that the Finance Committee approves the audited 2022 consolidated financial statements, that the Finance Committee approves the 2022 statement of revenue and expenses of the Trading Convention Center. Finance Committee approves the 2022 City of St. John Trust Funds financial statements. And finally, that the Finance Committee recommends that Common Council approve the 2022 consolidated financial statements as presented by staff, as well as the Trading Convention Center statements and Trust Fund financial statements. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thanks, Greg. Are there any questions from committee on the presentation? I don't see any questions. Councillor Redden, go ahead.
I don't have a question, Chair. I just wanted to note, this is incredible. I was just so happy to see, there's been $66 million decrease in debt in 1 year, and it's gone down over $230 million since 2018. It's just so impressive of what can happen when you're following your plan. So anyway, I was just totally excited seeing these numbers and just want to say great job to staff.
Thanks, Councillor. Mayor Reardon, go ahead.
I will say the same. Great job. our financial policies are certainly working for us, and I'll move the recommendations in the kit.
Thanks, and Councillor Hickey seconding the recommendations. Any other questions or comments? I'll just make one quick one. One of the slides talked about our financial plan working. One of the terms I see a lot in social media now that I think is meant to be an insult is the term gatekeeper. But I think in this case, our financial plans, it is incredibly important for us to continue to be gatekeepers of our financial plan and to make sure that the things that we have taken time to study and plan for the strategic long-term sustainability of our corporation, that we keep to what we said we were going to do. And obviously, it's kind of nice when we get these report cards, and ultimately, at audit time, it is the report card for how things are going, to see such positives. The balanced budget, if you're 2 point something surplus, but one was non-cash, which takes you into the hundred thousands of a deficit, which is minute in the scale of operation that we have, basically means we came in on budget. And to do that with this size of organization is a testament to the staff throughout. Certainly our financial team that we work with all the time, but to the CAO and the entire team in the city of St. John and St. John Water to hit that target. And they've done it pretty consistently. So kudos to everybody in the organization. And with that statement, so I'll take a vote on the motion. All in favor signify by raising your hand. Contrary minded, certainly unanimous.
And if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, we normally take some time out to allow the committee to have a discussion with our auditors without staff. So if you would like to do that, we have set up a side room for you to have that in-camera session with our auditors.
Okay, thank you. So committee, we will leave this meeting and rejoin it after, and then look for that in-camera session meeting in your calendar. We'll see you there in a minute. Thanks to the city clerk's office, that breakout session technically seemed to work very well. We found our way in, and I think most of us have found our way back. Councillor Radwin, are you with? Oh, just on cue. That was perfect timing. And we're back from the recess. Commissioner Levine, there's nothing that we discussed would change anything with regards to a motion. Are we at the point where we should be recommending the audit to our finance committee or to our council from finance committee?
Yes, that would be great, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I'll entertain that motion to recommend to St. John Common Council endorsement of the audit results for 2022. Your worship and Councillor Radwin. On the question, all in favor, signify by raising your hand. Contrary minded, unanimously carried. Thanks very much. And that screen isn't a touch screen, Mr. Sullivan. That takes us to item 6.3, our draft general fund operating budget. Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess we're going to jump a couple years ahead now from 22, and we'll jump into 24, I guess. Thanks. Okay, well, thank you, Chair Sullivan and members of the Finance Committee. I am pleased to be able to kick off the 2024 operating budget process. Committee members will see presentations this afternoon from several of our service areas, with the balance of service areas presenting either late July or early August. The draft budget before you was put together largely based on 2023 service levels, alignment with our long-term financial plan, strategic plan, as well as other approved plans. There are several unknowns as it comes to this first draft budget, which I will touch on in this presentation, but one common theme throughout this first draft is the impact of inflation is having on all service areas. I just wanted to provide a quick overview again of the 2024 operating budget process. Today and the next finance committee, service areas will present their budgets, and this will be a receive and file. We anticipate late August or September the results from Shape Your Budget engagement, which will be shared with the committee as a receive and file. September Finance Committee service-based budgets will be ready for presentation. These budgets will include current level of service, cost, and the amount of staffing required to provide the service. And again, this will also be a receive and file. Continuing with the process, draft budgets will again be presented to Finance Committee as a receive and file, and then ultimately for approval at the Finance Committee, which will then go to Council for a receive and file, and then ultimately for final approval. There will be plenty of So in summary, the timelines may change slightly, but the process is budget presentations, shape your budget, service-based budgeting, draft operating budgets are all receive and file, and no final decisions need to be made. The process is transparent, robust, and will allow committee members the opportunity to dive further into service areas. There will be opportunity to discuss, debate, consider service levels, funding of service levels, and potential enhancements before the Finance Committee considers approving a budget for Council's consideration. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide committee with a high-level overview of the various service areas in the 2024 operating budget. The draft budget was largely a baseline budget based on 2023 service levels, based on an increase of 3.35% in our tax base. Areas will discuss potential service enhancements for future consideration that is above the baseline budget being presented today. These presentations will provide the committee with the opportunity to ask questions of service areas, seek information, and if requested, service areas can return to the committee to provide additional information. Lastly, on this slide is a list of the service areas that are presenting today. as well as the ones at the next meeting. And again, I just want to note that the August meeting has not been confirmed yet. I would like to talk quickly about the assumptions built into the current draft in front of you. So for property taxes, we built in a 3.35% increase over last year's. Unconditional grant, there's a $500,000 reduction due to the loss in core funding. Regional Service Commission grant is not going to be anticipated for 2024. And we do have a new revenue built in for a potential new recycling program, and I will have Commissioner Hugenholt speak about this at the end of this presentation. For expenditures, I did touch briefly on some of these points already. I do want to clarify, however, that the additional funding or service enhancements that you'll see in presentations are not built into this baseline budget. I want to highlight some of the uncertainty that needs to be considered as we review this current draft. I won't go through each of these in detail, but I think it's safe to say that there will be future iterations of the budget as we work through these items. So this slide is our overall revenue comparisons year over year. As you can see, last year was 177.2, and this year, based on the assumptions we built in, we're at 184.4 million. And again, because we're a balanced budget, here is a snapshot of our expenditures by service area year over year. So the baseline budget revenues have increased by 4.03% over 2023. I've already touched on the first three bullets, but I want to highlight that the prior year surplus will be transferred into the capital reserve to fund the future recreation facility. Revenue from own source is about 11.06% of revenue. I just wanted to note that the strat plan target is 10%. A couple of increases we built in for 2024 is an increase in short-term interest revenue based on our current environment. There will be parking increases for residential parking permits, bylaw ticket increases, as well as off-street parking rates. And along with new revenue included for extended recycling program. So before we take any questions on the revenue assumptions, I would like Commissioner Hugenholtz maybe make a few comments regarding the potential revenue for the extended recycling program, and then I will certainly be happy to take any questions after that.
Thank you, Director Levine, and good afternoon, committee members. So I'll touch on a little bit what the extended producer responsibility program looks like and what it's going to mean for our community. This is a program that was initiated by the provincial government. They introduced legislation that places responsibility for end-of-life product management with industry and away from government and taxpayers. So there's already a couple current programs that are underway in our province here and have been for years. Like, for example, the programs for used paint, electronics, used oil, etc., where you can bring those to a depot and leave them there at no charge. So this actually will extend to many of the recycled materials that we currently collect, as well as some additional materials. So the brand owners, like the packaging and food companies, grocery stores, etc., they've established a not-for-profit called Circular Materials. They've entered into negotiations with Recycle NB, who is a board appointed by the province, to basically work out the details of a stewardship plan for these materials. That stewardship plan was ultimately approved in May of this year. That basically kicks off a 6-month window for Circular Materials then to negotiate or enter into agreements with municipalities or other entities to take over the curbside collection of these materials. So it's a very good development for our community. They also are looking at post-collection contractors. That may mean that they will enter into agreements with, like in our region, it would be the Fundy Region Solid Waste Commission, for that to be the post-collection sorting and handling facility. So there's a couple potential outcomes of this process for us. If we opt in, essentially, we will continue collection of the recycled materials at the curbside, subject to the terms of an agreement with Circular Materials. There would be an associated revenue stream with that as well. We're not exactly sure the extent of that revenue stream and the associated risks. But in the budget before you here this afternoon, we've assumed around $1 million worth of revenue from that program. So it's not insignificant. The other option is that St. John opts out. So if we are not able to come to agreeable terms with Circular Materials, they will reach out to another service provider, and that would likely be a private waste hauler like a Faro or Waste Management, a company like that. They would take over that work. In turn, we would have some hard dollar savings as a result. And we would also have a number of employees to reallocate to our other service areas. So currently, of course, we collect recycling at nighttime. We have about 8 full-time employees dedicated to that collection. And we do need to backfill every time there's an absence or vacation. So it's not an insignificant service for us. At this point in time, we have received the general terms and conditions from Circular Materials, but we have not yet received a financial offer. There are some other elements that we have not received yet either, but in accordance with the timelines of the stewardship plan, this needs to be kicked off no later than November. So they're looking to contract with us, basically have our yes or no by July 24th of this year. So at the July 4th meeting of council, we will be before you with a recommendation one way or the other. So either way, it's going to be a good step forward, but what exactly that will look like and the benefit for our community remains to be seen. So subject to your questions, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hugenholtz. So questions from committee on the revenues, the recycling, new exciting recycling program that Commissioner Hugenholtz has talked about, or anything that Controller Levine has described? Your Worship, go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just will say that I was on that team a couple of years ago that looked at packaging and printed paper. And so I knew that that was coming down the pipeline. So it's good news. It's great to hear it. Thanks. I love that when the cost gets sent back to the producer, because that's who should be. And if they have to increase their cost to the public, that's fine. But then I have the option of buying that product or moving to another product. So it gives me some opportunity for choice versus it just being downloaded onto Citizen. So I really like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? CAO McGovern, I see your hand up. You're on mute, I think. Okay, you're not on mute, but I can't hear you.
Nor can I.
Well, CAO McGovern works his way back in. I guess I'll add my comments. Reduce, reuse, and recycle is in that order for a reason. It's not just a catchy catchphrase. So I like the fact that we have an opportunity as a city to get revenue from it, but probably more important, pushing the responsibility back to source. Hopefully we'll get that reduced part of packaging you know, when it's hitting them in the wallet, they will start to become better environmental stewards. With regards to the parking revenue increase, I still remember way back when Plan SJ was being talked about, and we had high-powered Toronto planning consultants down meeting with council initially to talk about what kind of opportunities there were. And certainly Plan SJ has come from it, and Zone SJ and all of those things on the building side. But when they were asked, you know, how can we increase our own source revenue? And in particular, how do you increase own source revenue from those who use city services but don't live in the city? And their answer, and we probably asked them the question 10 times, and 10 times they gave us the answer: parking. You know, that is the service where the city gets revenue that is used by everybody, including those who do not live in the city. So, you know, I that has stuck with me over these years. So I'm certainly happy to see that, you know, parking revenue comes in. We use some of that parking revenue to provide city services, but it is that opportunity to receive some revenue from those who, for whatever reasons I don't understand, have chosen not to reside in the city of St. John, but still come in. The other piece I think that is important at the outset as we talk about budget is that 3.35% initial number, and we're early in the process. That is the current, what we are predicting is the required increase in assessment related revenue in order just to maintain the status quo and do what we're doing. And that 3.35%, as we know, but for the public that's watching, is a combination of your assessment on property, which comes from the province, and the property tax rate on your property that comes from the city. So those combined figures, we are predicting right now, if we were not to do any service enhancements or reductions, just to maintain what we're doing now, that math equals 3.35%. So that's an important number to keep an eye on as we go through this process. So those will be my comments. CAO McGovern, let's give her another try.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay now?
We can.
All right, perfect. Yeah, just two additional points I wanted to make in addition to Commissioner Hugenholz's points. One being that we are awaiting the offer, the proposal from Circular Materials, which we expect to get in July. So it'll be a quick assessment for us to then review, assess options, and make a recommendation to council in July as well. So we're awaiting that. And then secondly, Circular Materials will be coming in to council as well to present this summer. So you'll be able to get a first-hand update from them as well at that time.
Cool, exciting stuff. Thank you. Back to Mr. Levine. So, are you good to carry on?
Absolutely. So our first presentation is corporate services, and our CAO will walk through his presentation.
Okay, thank you. Glad we did a trial run earlier with the microphone. So, Craig, will you bring that up on the presentation?
Sure, Brent. Just give me 1 second, please.
Perfect. So overall, as Craig's bringing that up, you'll see that there's a slight increase in the budget of $344,000, which relates primarily to human resources and the clerk's office, which I'll get into as we go through the presentation. And so wait a second while Craig's pulling that up. Thanks, Craig. Just moving to the next slide. As I say, there's an increase in budget of $344,000, which relates primarily to human resources in the clerk's office, which I'll get into. That makes up the majority of the increase. And then on the next slide, for the Mayor's Office, Council, and a slight decrease, as you'll see in the budget for the CAO's office. I'll simply highlight the focus being in advancing council's priorities, the strategic plan and catalytic infrastructure projects and other council initiatives, and advocating for actions in provincial government's white paper on municipal reform, and then exploring the regional service opportunities. And on the next slide for the Mayor's Office, Council and City Clerk, there are slight increases in the budgets, as is noted on the slide. And for the Clerk's Office, the focus is on providing those support services, as you know, to Council and Committee, while also reviewing and updating Council's policy and the Clerk's standard operating procedures. We do have a temporary admin assistant to support committee meetings and the various meetings that we have, council meetings and committee, given the number of those, and so that support is essential to keep up with the workload, and so that accounts for that increase. And then on the next slide, for human resources, there is an increase due to our obligations to maintain a healthy and safe workplace while focusing on employee engagement and mental health initiatives for all employees. We will be addressing the safety audit items that Finances Committee is familiar with, and improving our employee safety systems, and a focus on, and that focus will require resources. And so there's also a focus on creating and implementing succession planning for the workforce, being more strategic so that we can attract and retain top talent. We will be developing as well diversity and inclusion initiatives, and we will be advancing the 10-year human resources strategy that's part of our strategic plan. And that will also be linked in with our employee performance management system and overall focus on employee engagement. And on the next slide is there's not much change in the budgets, as you'll see. And so for the focus of the talents in this team, being our General Counsel's office, real estate and industrial parks, is to support a lot of the other initiatives that we have underway. And new focus, however, is to develop and implement the contract management function. So we have a lot of contracts that we manage in the city, and we really see an opportunity there for providing good management and oversight of all of those contracts to bring better value. But with that, we'll need a focused resource in order to deliver on that service enhancement. We'll continue to advance the city's truth and reconciliation efforts, and continue advancing the St. John Industrial Parks catalytic project. And for the next slide, for customer service, again, there's not much change in the budget here, as you see. For customer service, we'll continue to build on the CRM system and the Bell systems to increase communication with customers, and a focus will be on enhancing the ways for residents to interact with the city, and continue to focus on enhancing the customer experience that we have now, and supporting our services that we do provide in terms of focus on staff retention and development and training for our customer service area. And on the next slide, for corporate communications, also here a little budget change, as you'll see. We will be rolling out and promoting the city's renewed brand guidelines and strategy. Something that's currently underway that I touched on this week at council. We'll also advance the objectives for communications and external relations that are in our external relations framework, and continue to provide the support that is provided internally and externally with communication through our social media channels and website content, graphic design services, etc. And lastly, the focus is further on strengthening relationships with the community, corporate, and our partners at both federal and provincial level, along with other stakeholders. And the next slide. So in summary, the proposed service enhancements are noted here. So General Counsel's office, there's that 1 FTE for contract management for customer or for human resources. It'd be 2 FTEs that really focus on those safety items that I touched on and further enhancing the safety culture. And then and on the HR, more on the HR focus side, focus on recruiting and disability management. And some of the challenges that we have are listed there. So that provides a summary for the corporate services area. And I think next is strategic services.
Maybe we'll pause in between to see if there are any questions as we go through. So from committee, do you have any questions on corporate services for CAO McGovern? I've got a couple of quick ones. Finance committee owns the long-term financial plan. We're putting an ad hoc committee to manage the long-term strategic plan. Who owns the long-term human resources plan?
Well, I think we'd be going through to committee of the whole for that.
Okay.
But we're really in the process now of the RFP and engagement of services for that. So we've not yet had to report through for it. Leave that with us in terms of giving some consideration.
Yeah, no, I just want to plant that seed. I think I mentioned earlier in the meeting about being gatekeepers of the financial plan. You know, I think 3 times a meeting we hear strat plan, long-term financial plan, right? We council are committed to those, and I think it helps to have owners. So as we go through the HR plan as well, I'll leave that seed with you. My other question, industrial parks is a catalytic project. In the current budget, there doesn't seem to be, it seems to be status quo. I guess I kind of expect to see, where it's a catalytic project, some increased spending in that area. Would that be mostly capital related, or is that something we'll see later? Can you shed any more light on that?
Yeah, and that's one of the ones that we listed, you know, in the outset, as far as, you know, as we move further along and gain greater clarity in terms of our long-term strategic plan for the industrial park, that will help inform where resources and a focus of spend needs to be. We don't have that clarity as of yet. So I think as we continue to work through our catalytic project that we have underway, gain clarity in terms of the governance structure, which is something that we're looking at now, and get an understanding of that, we'll be in a better position. So there could be some recommendations at a later date for the 2024 budget as we get more information. But early days at this point in time, we don't see the need for additional spend.
Okay, I guess that would be one I'd put a little asterisk by as we go forward, because we've asked people to show the status quo, and you have. But going into year 3 of a 5-year mandate, I would hope that, and I would expect to see likely some increased spend to move that catalytic project forward. Thank you for that. Councillor Radwin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So one thing that I was really happy to see was the potential of having one more person in the clerk's office. Clerk's office does a great job, in my opinion, but I feel like they're really stretched. And of course, a lot of their work consists of deadlines, and I'm sure it can create some real challenges there. As I keep going through this, I just wanted to mention that I end up feeling worried about inflationary pressures a lot. And so I'm hoping that when staff are looking at this budget going forward, that there's a lot of consideration for that. I want us to try to avoid going forward, dipping into reserves unless some unforeseen emergency comes. You know, that's what it should be for. If there's some sort of unforeseen emergency that comes forward, or there seems to be a real great opportunity that we would be looking at that we shouldn't be ignoring. But you know, I feel as I'm looking through this, I know it's status quo. And the other big thing that I'm looking at is with these increases, and some of them are coming up, but some major increases to some budgets like public safety. I always feel concerned that if we don't end up having continued growth, are these numbers going to continue to be sustainable? So it makes me wonder whether or not should some positions be temporary positions just in case, so that we're not cutting back later. So anyway, just a few thoughts that I had that I'm kind of concerned as I'm going through this stuff, thinking what could happen and how can we avoid having, you know, dipping into reserves later. So
Thank you for that, Councillor. Okay, thank you, CAO McGovern. Mr. Levine, I think we're ready to move on.
Perfect. Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I will be presenting strategic services as well as other charges on behalf of CFO Fudge. Okay, here's just an overview of our budget with the various increases and a small decrease. As you can see, I'll touch point on this one that information technology is probably has the largest increase. So strategic service from a finance department, and we included the assessment. Obviously, assessment will go up based on our tax assessment increases, so that goes hand in hand. But for the finance department, some of the key priorities and highlights, we want to continue to building upon our robust industrial internal audit program. We are a core service supporting the procurement and implementation of a modern enterprise resource planning system. Assist with leveraging city benefits from the ownership of St. John, I should say, Energy. And as well as I spoke about the variance in the assessment base. So under our supply chain management, we want to continue with the implementation of strategic procurement policy, which encompasses environment, social and economic best value for our taxpayers, as well as modernization of procurement process through e-procurement, and that is with partnership with another municipality. For information technology, we want to look at implementing the recommendations of the IT review and the strategy, as well as supporting the implementation of technology and processes to meet Next Gen 911, as well as related legislated requirements, as well as investing in improvements to our city's website. And the year-over-year increase is largely just due to the actual increased cost with maintenance agreements, security, and licenses. From a corporate planning perspective, supporting the development of operational level metrics and implementing a corporate performance management and reporting system. Initiate the start of redesigning of a continuous improvement program to integrate with our performance management system. And corporate planning will be the lead on the procurement and implementation of a modern enterprise resource planning system, or our new ERP system. And the variance year over year decrease is really due to the level of professional services not needed for 2024. From an insurance point of view, so insurance is going to undertake a risk management, risk tolerance, and program review in 2024. And the variance insurance actually relates to allocation of salary that was previously 100% budgeted in finance. And now that new role is actually split 50-50 between the finance department and our insurance. Other charges, or what we call our fiscal charges, were both $343,000 below budget. Under fiscal charges, one of the things we're looking at right now is the city will be looking to borrow about $8 million in 2023 for our capital projects. As we're all aware of the high interest uncertainty, we are going to be looking at the option of borrowing that money from a reserve, which is allowable within our policies. And if we can go down this road, it can be significant savings in interest paid, as we'll be paying ourselves rather than a province per se. Capital from operating, $6.3 million. That aligns with our long-term financial plan and is part of the approved 2024 budget. And the contribution to capital reserve is the $3 million that we have earmarked annually for the new recreation facility reserves. And we are not putting forward any new additional staffing or service enhancement as part of our 2024 operating budget at this time. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Over to the committee. Questions for Controller Levine? Seeing none, just one quick comment. $6.4 million in capital from operating built into our budget. Again, long-term financial plan, exciting stuff. For those at home who don't know what capital from operating means, that means capital projects that we are not borrowing money for. As a city, we borrow money every year because we always have capital projects. But if you're borrowing money every year, it makes some sense if you have similar capital projects every year, that instead of paying interest to somebody else, you should be building it into your budget. I remember at one point in time, way back in the city's history, that had been squeezed down to nothing. And in fact, in order to make the budget balance, there were a few scary times when the city considered borrowing money for their operating expenses. This is a very good indicator of the health of our financial position with the city of St. John right now, that we are planning for $6.4 million towards our capital that we're not borrowing next year. Again, really good, less interest payments. If we can figure out how to borrow from ourselves to avoid some of the high interest rates that are currently, again, another smarter move. And these are behind the scenes kind of things that don't get a lot of fanfare, but boy, are they important when it comes to having the money to resurface that tennis court. You know, and we had that list of items a few finance committees ago of great recreational items. And one of the ways we get to do a lot of those is because the smart people we have working in finance that look at things like this. So just kudos to you. And I don't see any other questions, so we can move forward. Thanks, Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And next on the presentation is our folks from the St. John Police Force, who will are presenting their budget along with the Public Safety Communications Center budget. And I will turn it over to those folks.
Good afternoon, Controller Levine, and good afternoon, Finance Committee members. Let's see if I can share my screen. Just give me a second here. Let me know if you can see our screen.
Yeah, we can see it. Great.
Perfect. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2024 draft operating budget for the police force and the Public Safety Communications Center. Let's get into it. First of all, it's the St. John Police Force 2024 proposed or draft budget. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but there are some common themes. As Controller Levine mentioned, the costs are increasing, and that is driving basically cost increases on every GL line, expenditure line that we see on the screen. But there are some major themes that are also adding to the inflationary pressures. Basically, the police force is executing on a long-term strategic plan to put more officers back on active duty while trying to save money, trying to save costs. So in the salaries and wages lines, you will see some increases that are related to these tasks. Also, you're going to see some increases in professional services, which is mostly related to legal cost increases. Some of these proposed and executed changes are resulting in some legal matters that needs to be resolved. So we're budgeting for legal fees to be increased in 2024. And the third main theme in our budget that's driving the numbers is the need to keep up with the technological changes. St. John Police Force is part of a larger technological environment. We are trying to keep up the pace with the province and with the other police forces. We need to input certain changes that are driving some of these costs. A little bit more information on some of these changes or proposed service enhancements. What I would like to mention here is in connection with the technology that the police force is working on, changing the record management system. This is a major technological change for the organization, and some of the costs related to this transformation are unknown at this moment. We are trying to get the best estimates that we can based on the work that needs to be done. But with these projects come some unknowns, so we are trying to put some contingency measures in place in the budget for those purposes. If I move on to the Public Safety Communications Center, it's very much showing the same themes. The salaries and benefits lines showing some increases that are related to the need to basically to transform our recruitment, retention practices. It's not easy to find bilingual staff for these positions that are high stress positions. So we're trying to ensure that there's a good environment that helps to retain the folks and helps to create a place for the new people that we are going to be putting into these positions. The PSCC is also participating in some of these technological transformative changes, and the budget is reflective of those changes. The service enhancements, I just basically go into more detail about those technological changes. The RSM record management system that we're implementing is called Versaterm. This is going to change everything on how we communicate with our officers, on how we create tickets, on how we communicate with the province. So this is one of the largest projects that we're going to be working on next year. And then there are some other technological changes that's related to basically asset replacement. We need to ensure that our assets are up to standards, today's standards, so we can take the calls and dispatch the officers as needed. And lastly, the third entity under the umbrella is the St. John Police Commission. There are no major changes here, as you can see it. The budget is pretty much as it was or as it is in 2023. I wanted to mention that all these budgets were presented to the Police Commission, and they approved these numbers, and we went through the numbers in detail. That's basically at the end of the presentation. Open to any questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Radwin. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. So, first of all, I see your chairs here too. Nice to see you, Chair, and thank you, first of all, for coming so early on in these budgetary discussions to our meeting. I appreciate it. I wanted to know, first of all, if the revenues that you would, or the income that you would need for Versaterm, if this was going to be like a line item that you would basically need for 1 year, or 2 years? Because I'm assuming it wouldn't become a permanent part of your budget.
This should be a 1-year implementation term for Versaterm, and basically we are treating this as a capital project. So any cost that we're going to incur up front, they are not included in the budget that you see, because those are related to the profit and loss statement. So this is going to be a capital item. The ongoing costs are going to be lower, but we are yet to determine those exact costs, because as we are implementing, we're going to be learning about some of those add-ons that we haven't thought about, but we might need. We also need to make sure that we create a solution that is plug and play with the province's solutions, the Crown's systems. So there are quite a few unknowns, but we know what the capital budget is for this project, and we'll try to implement the system within those limits.
Okay, so I see from what you're saying that'll be kind of like an ask going forward. So I'm looking at your budget. I'm seeing that it's like an extra $1 million roughly, and of course around $400,000 of that is going to salary. I think when looking at your overall budget, my biggest concern, and it just screams out at me, is budgeting for $827,000 of overtime. And I end up thinking, for sure, in your line of work, you'd need to account for some overtime because you would have emergencies come up. Obviously, probably sick calls coming in and things like that. But can you speak to why so much money is being spent on overtime? And I'm wondering if it has to do with restrictions when it comes to staffing that might be built into your contract.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor. Thank you for the question. So part of that is that we have a number of people that are off on various types of leave, right? So that kind of limits where we are, whether it's work safe, whether it's maternities, whether it's sick leave, whatever the case may be, right? And so what happens is we're restricted by our contract on minimum numbers. So and those numbers, in fairness to everybody, and I present this here to you, are not really based on any kind of workload. They were contractually negotiated years ago. Nobody can really figure out where that came from. So I'm giving everybody the benefit of the doubt that when it was negotiated, there was a reason for that. Right now, to try to figure that out, Deputy Dwyer is overseeing our operational staffing review, where we're trying to link up the numbers, peak times that we need officers on the road, other peak times that aren't, so that when we go into any kind of negotiation, we can talk about, making sure that we have the number of members we need at peak times, and when we don't need those numbers, that we have them. So yes, so you're correct. It's based on that overtime. Essentially, most of it, to be honest with you, is as a result of contractual obligations, which I'm hoping the staffing review will expose when we actually do need those numbers and when we don't. And so that's ongoing, and it should be completed by the end of August. So we have been putting this stuff together. We've hired a group that is able to provide the analytics for us and has done it for several organizations across the country. And so we'll have some pretty robust numbers to defend our position on that overtime.
Well, that's great to hear, Chief. And I mean, for me, I want to be able to see you being able to manage your staff as you see fit, to make sure that your staff are also able to have the staffing that they need to keep them safe on the job. And I hate to hear about these sort of restrictions. So hopefully going forward in negotiations, we'll end up seeing some changes with that, because you have tons of experience, and I know that you're going to want to keep your staff safe. So to be able to have that flexibility instead of being restricted, I think is really important for you in your position. So anyway, I hope to see changes going forward with negotiations.
Yeah, and so if you don't mind, Councillor, I can add a little bit to that from your question is, so what we're trying to do is, maximize the people that you have, right? So that's what we're looking at. So getting the more uniformed members on the road, getting more marked vehicles on the road. So we took a bunch of our for instance, as we've been turning cars that aren't marked into marked cars. So that you have a force multiplier when you're out there. So, a vehicle that wouldn't have normally been marked, we're marking it. So that when you're out there, we do have a police officer in a vehicle. They might not be going to a call. They might be in training or whatever the case may be, but it is a marked vehicle. And so that if they do have to answer a call, they will. So if you look at recently, historically, our K9 members would wait for a K9 call and go. So going forward, as we train our members now, they will be doing patrol calls. They will be backing up patrol calls. So we'll have 2 more patrol vehicles out there from the fleet, but our K9 members will no longer just be waiting for a call, that they will be answering calls in uniform. They just happen to have a dog as a partner, which stays in the car unless they need it for the purpose of doing their call. So that's a piece of it. The other piece is that we looked at how can we get that force multiplier is we looked at the opportunity. So we're putting 4, if you looked at the budget line there, we're looking at hiring 3 civilians members, which is substantially cheaper, by putting 4 uniform members on the road. So that we hired 3 civilian members, built 2.5 for report validation, we call. And then something that really I've been trying to lobby the province on is the RTIPA. So we get a number of RTIPA requests that are third-party requests, right? That takes significant amount of time away from the person we have doing it. And this is just like a media outlet that would kind of shotgun a request, and they're paying the same as a person that, like you or I, that have our information. We have no problem giving it. If you need your information, I'll get you your information. That's part of the service that we provide. But when you're looking at third-party agencies, looking at insurance companies and different places looking for that, there should be a price for that. So historically, or used to, there was regulations in the Act that allowed that. So the New Brunswick Chiefs of Police are lobbying the government to reinstate those regulations so that as a third-party entity, it's going to cost you what it cost you to get that request. That's a 2.5 position. So by hiring 3 civilians, we're actually getting 4 jobs done, and we're putting 4 uniformed police officers back on the street without hiring them. So if you look at the salary differential there, without adding a uniformed person, we're adding 4 bodies to the road. The other thing, Councillor, that we're doing, which I know would interest you because we've had these discussions before, and I think would very much interest Councillor Hickey as well from a public safety perspective that we've talked about before, is that we're looking at quite a bit more integration with police forces around the province. So we're looking at a lot of, right now we have the IEUs, which is the Integrated Enforcement Unit. So right now I have a unit that includes the RCMP, Kennebecasis, Justice and Public Safety. We're also looking, given the increase at the port, adding CBSA to that group as well. And so we have access though to the entire province and all those units. So if you looked at a couple months ago, we had a big, huge takedown here that we could not do ourselves. We called the integrated units from across the province. It didn't cost us a dime. They came in, they helped us. We did what we made the arrest, did everything we had to do. And that's how seamless. So we're looking at a lot of entities like that where we can share resources, where everybody kind of is paying the same across the province. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Bathurst, KV, St. John. So if St. John provides, let's say, a body to an entity, then we would pay less because we're supplying the body. So those are the kind of things that we're looking for to ensure that we put the most number of police officers on the street that we can deal with the issues that we're trying to deal with.
Well, that's wonderful, Chief. Thank you for that. And I mean, it sounds like you're being very progressive. So I hope that your staff will be supportive of it, because I think that you're not only going to be giving better service by making these changes, but you're also going to be giving them better support. So, you always kind of look at it like, what's in it for me? Well, I think that's what's in it for them. So, but it sounds like it'll be better service for the community. So thank you very much for that progressive way of thinking.
You're on mute, Chair, but I assume you were offering it to me, and I'll take the opportunity nonetheless. Thanks very much, Chief, and nice to see the full suite of team here. I think this budget's positive. I mean, in line with both our increases at the city as well as in line with about like a 4% inflation rate, which I think is very prudent. I do have one question, and it was referenced both in the presentation and a little bit in Councillor Radwan's questions. What percentage of that salaries and wages line item is representative of either members or folks not in active duty?
That is included. If the question is about those people being included, that's included in the budget right now.
And what percentage of what number of that larger line item is representative of folks who aren't in active duty?
It's
19%.
19%. Okay. Thanks very much, Chief.
So, Councillor, so that's the overall that are not involved. So that could be an injury recovery, that could be a maternity leave, that could be a work safe. So that number of 19% is inclusive of all of those. So they're all people that should be working on the front line that aren't working on the front line for various reasons.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, team. Just on the theme of, I guess, more boots on the streets, with regards to the technology upgrade, moving to Versaterm, as I understand it, there are two significant benefits. One is our old system had difficulty when we were gathering data to compare to other police services around the country, and this is a more modern system so that when you're comparing trends of data, the information that we have will match up better with information from other services. If you could confirm that. And I guess the second part is, does this help with officers reducing their amount of admin time to help them spend more time on the street? If you could help with those two things, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the question. Another good question. What a great team here. All the great questions, right? I love it. So we have, so on your first question, it integrates us with the rest of the province and the country. So we can speak to each other much better. As you may or you probably wouldn't know, we don't have the adequacy standards in New Brunswick that puts us in a position where every police force has to have certain pieces of whatever. So we could have gone off and done our own thing again, which we did before, and we're not integrated, and so that's not good. This puts us in a position to line up with the entire province. The other piece of that is it adds a new level of accountability as well. So there's a lot of things put in Versaterm that will automatically flag occurrences, high-risk occurrences, things that need to be addressed and sent to the right places, which now it's kind of on a wing and a prayer, right? We rely on the people that are doing it, and somebody goes off for 4 days, something might get missed. This way, this system will not allow those things to get missed. So important things that need to be flagged will be flagged. On the other part of the admin piece, I wouldn't say that Versaterm would make it give them less, but it's more efficient. So when you're looking things up, for instance, if you think of the old Rolodex, right? That's what we're using here now, basically to look things up. Where now when an officer wants to link, say, certain crime to a certain person to a certain location, they hit a button, it'll all pop up for them. It'll populate there by themselves. Where before you would have to look at 3 or 4 different systems, so that would take a long time. So as far as efficiencies, that kind of mapping is very, very good and very easy and an efficiency for our members. The other piece with that is that we've introduced the alternative response unit, which is taking calls off of the front line. So that's a place where you call it. So historically where a member would have to go to that call, they're not going anymore, right? We've introduced online reporting. So again, where a member would have to normally go to that call, they don't have to go. We introduced the duty sergeant at the front desk, where normally you would have a member have to come back into the office to answer that call. The duty sergeant is there 24/7 to answer that call. So if you look at statistically, I think in the last 3 months have taken probably around 700 calls away from the frontline officer that's out there doing frontline duties, away from them with those 3 implementations. So when you look at overall, I wouldn't say that Versaterm makes it more efficient, but the 4 pieces that we put in have made it more efficient. Does that make sense, Chair?
Yeah, it does make sense. Thank you very much for that explanation. We're a dollar and cents team here, and to follow up on Councillor Hickey's point, we're looking at status quo across the organization, the 3.35% revenue increase, and to come in at a budget slight around 4%, give or take, with the number of efficiencies and enhancements that you've described is it's quite encouraging to me. That you're in line with kind of the rest of the organization where we are, and you're able to talk about efficiencies and improvements that not only bring us in line with other agencies in the province, but more boots on the streets, better data to help you make better decisions. So thanks overall, and we'll look forward to more as the process continues.
Yeah, and I think too, Mr. Chair, just to put on that, what Versaterm will do for us as well is provide those analytics to back up what we're saying. Because right now I can say whatever I want, right? And where is that? So it's not really live, it's not tangible. But Versaterm will give us those statistics because we hear, so for instance, when I'm looking at the number of overdoses in the city, the amount of time it takes for our officers to respond, everything they do with that, I've got to have my analytics person, our analyst, go through that and look through 4 different systems to find that out. With Versaterm, we'll be able to hit one button and be able to tell you that, and then tell you how long it takes, how much time it takes, and what we're doing at those calls. So I think that's another efficiency to the organization where we don't have to do that necessarily to that frontline member.
Yeah, that's quite exciting. I mean, one of the strengths of the St. John Police Service over the years has been data and using data and wanting to know more and analyze more data. So, I see this as building on a strength that your team has already had and will continue to push our service forward. So thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And thanks to the team. So, Mr. Levine, I think we're ready to move on to our next service.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next one is Mr. Ian Fogan, and he'll be presenting utilities and infrastructure.
Thank you, Craig, and Mr. Chair, happy to be here. I'll share the presentation. And just to confirm that everybody can see that?
We can.
Okay, great. So I'm here to present the 2024 Utilities and Infrastructure Service draft budget. Utilities and infrastructure, just to be clear, this budget presentation includes the general fund items, not the St. John Water utility fund. That will come at a later date. So this is just the general fund portion, which includes engineering, carpentry shop, facilities management, city hall, GIS, stockroom, and stormwater or urban stormwater system. For engineering, you can see we're just looking for a small variance, and I should say overall, with all of them combined, so it is a small variance around 3% difference from 2023 to 2024. For engineering, this division is led by Mike Baker and provides engineering and project management services to the city. Those are overseeing the capital budget projects. As our key initiatives, we are looking to update the storm drainage criteria manual this year to consider climate change. And one key piece, as more funding from other levels of government becomes available, we have seen a dramatic increase in the amount of work related to those. In previous years, we may have had 3 or 4 different funding buckets with 7 or 8 projects that required agreements, required reporting and applications, and various back and forth with legal to refine those, and with consultants to really nail down the reporting and the exchange of money. And now, the last we counted, we were up to 21 separate buckets with well over 30, in the mid 30s, different projects. So the number of work, the level of support is greatly appreciated, and that's what pushes our capital budget forward and pushes forward a reduction on our infrastructure deficit. It's just becoming more and more complex, and it does require more attention in order to complete that. Next, we have our Carpenter Shop, Facilities Management, and City Hall building budgets. This division is led by Samir Yamin, and I should note here that the facilities management piece also includes pieces on our climate change and climate change adaptation action plans that is overseen by his staff. Their main role is to, through these three services, is maintaining city assets, monitoring efficiency for energy use, implementing our GHG reduction programs, and managing the city's adaptation to climate change, and also completing quality repairs and maintenance to extend the life of its existing assets. And the City Hall building portion here is really just our lease payment and our utilities charge for that, occupying that space. Next, we have our GIS and stockroom portions. These are led by two of our managers. GIS is led by Yves Legier, and Mike Gray leads our stockroom portion. And as the GIS, the main support is the orthophotography and asset coordination and mapping. And the stockroom keeps us stocked with items for quick repairs for water and infrastructure repairs. This our last area is the stormwater or urban stormwater system. The key priority in this area is around video inspection and flushing program. We do have an urban stormwater system which grows every year, but this only operates currently half the year. Half the year, the staff is dedicated towards a winter maintenance program, and then in the summer, they come over and work with the utilities and infrastructure folks led by Jason Leclerc to really update and maintain the urban stormwater system. As far as service enhancement options, 3 or 4 pieces really that we are giving consideration for, and not necessarily in 2024, but in future years to come. One is around our urban stormwater system. As you know, or as I just mentioned, I guess we only operate that half the year, but our urban stormwater system is also increasing with every year. Every year as we complete those stormwater separation projects, the amount of stormwater piping increases, and which will increase the burden on maintenance. And we could give it an iterative increasing ability to manage that area, and in the future this will help us reduce things such as flooding and hopefully winter maintenance on our storm drains as well. Another area to highlight for possible service enhancement is as we advance towards our carbon neutral goals, our carbon net neutral goals, to look at enhancing that service through a climate change manager to oversee that. Also to work hand in hand with our community climate action plan. Also in our asset management program right now, we do not have an asset management system that we operate. We are mostly basing it on some Microsoft products. So there could be an opportunity for enhancement of that system through a dedicated asset management system. And finally, with the carpenter shop, there's an opportunity as well to perhaps increase casual staff in the summer to look at better asset inventory and better maintenance of some of our facilities. stop sharing that piece.
Thanks, Mr. Vogan. Questions from committee? I don't see one small one. You talked about the asset management system software. How does that help us become more efficient? Like for the $75,000 investment, does that get us $75,000 plus of payback, or is it another fancy spreadsheet? If you could help with that.
Sure. Yeah, no, what it is not another fancy spreadsheet. That's what we're trying to get away from. So right now, you're right. It is kind of operated as a fancy spreadsheet or a database that has to be manually updated. What we're trying to do is link our levels of service along with work orders to the assets, so that if you look at even a stretch of sidewalk or a stretch of pipe or a street lamp, if there's a service request related to that, that the cost of that service request and that maintenance be linked to that asset. So it gives you a fuller picture of just what that asset is really costing over the long haul. What does that 100 meters of asphalt really cost you? What does that lamppost really cost you? So drive that much better decision making, and hopefully then when you look at making decisions on asset replacement, you'll know not only what the upfront capital costs are, but what our experience has been with the lifetime of maintenance on that piece of asset.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Nope. Thanks, Mr. Fogan. And Mr. Levine, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed that the mayor is back online, so we saved the greatest for last. We're going to talk about Mr. Hugenholtz is going to present Public Works and Transportation Services.
I don't know about the greatest, but definitely the last. So I need to share screen. Okay. Yeah, so I guess in some ways our budget is a little bit in contrast to other budgets. I guess in terms of the numbers, the approach has been relatively consistent. We're certainly trying to manage costs as much as possible, trying to come in with a status quo service level budget. But this does represent approximately an overall 8.7% increase from 2023 over, or for 2024 over last year. So Director Levine did allude to some of the associated revenue impacts. So changes going into 2024 on that side of things. The EPR, again, as a reminder, is budgeted for a $1 million increase. Parking is approximately around a $600,000 increase. Utility cuts as well is a little bit more modest, $90K increase. Those increases are offset partially by lower revenue from bag tags, but that's actually a good thing for us. Less bag tags means less waste, and we do see that reflected in our tipping fee numbers. So the increase that you see here, about $3.6 million, has approximately $1.5 million in offsets on the revenue side. So we are a little bit different from many of the service areas in that we rely heavily on purchased goods and services. We're roughly 60-40, so 60% goods and services, 40% salaries. So with inflation at record highs, we certainly are seeing that impact in our service areas. When we look at things like equipment costs, fuel, and asphalt in particular, some of those inflationary amounts that we've seen over the last year are around 27% or so, and some those are on a big number to begin with. So that kind of is a little bit of a backdrop to the overall budget picture. So I should mention that transit is going to get discussed at the August Finance Committee meeting. So I am going to touch on some of the other significant adjustments on a service-by-service basis. Yeah, so it's mostly a status quo budget. I do reference their exceptions from operational and maintenance impacts from some of the capital works underway. So what that's translated to for us is the addition of about 5 casual employees during the summer construction season. That's the only change in FTEs that's budgeted currently. And those resources are intended to pick up the day-to-day maintenance from some of the capital works. Like on the park side, for example, we've had a couple extensions to Harbor Passage. We're going to be undergoing significant improvements to both Dominion Park and Market Square West. So we want to make sure we have the resources there to take care of those assets. We are certainly concentrating a lot on active transportation as well. We introduced a number of different bike lanes in various areas over the last year or two. That all comes with some maintenance obligations with the painting of the bike symbols. Some of the separated bike trails have additional maintenance requirements. So that has been included in the budget as well. So just the trend, I guess this is the first opportunity we've really had a chance to talk to committee about since we embarked on the sustainability initiatives. Certainly some of those specific initiatives, the resource implications, the dollar amounts, the service implications were discussed explicitly at the time. But in addition to that, 60% of those reductions were in manpower reductions, and they were not specifically tagged to any kind of service level adjustments. But it has been significant, like in terms of permanent employees, we're down 17 employees on the work side of things. We're down approximately 5 employees on the park side as well. So that definitely has some service impacts for us. I'll mention as well that those reductions have actually occurred concurrently with bringing in either new services or stopping some contracting out and bringing that work in-house. I mean, a real good example of that would be recycling collection. I alluded in my previous comments that we have at least 8 full-time employees dedicated to that service alone. So that's certainly pulling people away from other work, and we're seeing it in our ability to deliver service. So what we see is that we're kind of moving away to some extent from our planned routine maintenance activities, more to reactive maintenance and an overall lowering of service levels. So the streets and sidewalk budgets would include both, basically all of the construction related activities for streets and sidewalks, including asphalt repairs, sidewalk repairs, our street cleaning and street sweeping programs, and others. Some of the significant elements I would highlight here, you'll notice the variance from last year into, or rather this year into 2024 is roughly $1.8 million or so. A full $1 million of that is associated with the resurfacing program alone. Our inflationary adjustments that we've seen just with this recent contract was around 27% increase. So this $1 million increase will not offset that full increase, but we do expect, this number here, 35 lane kilometers, it's probably actually going to be about 3 to 4 kilometers more than that. So we're just shy of 40 lane kilometers of resurfacing anticipated for 2024. We're baking in roughly about another 5% increase in unit costs going into next year as well. So we'll see if that holds. Just as a sort of a benchmark, with the entire inventory of our streets, we should be either resurfacing or reconstructing somewhere around 50 to 55 lane kilometers of streets on an annual basis. So, we're at 40 with resurfacing. We do expect that the reconstruction programs will probably add another 3 to 5 lane kilometers. That does leave us a little bit short of our targets, however. So we'll have to monitor that very carefully and make sure that we don't regress in terms of our expensive asphalt assets. This budget does anticipate largely eliminating the asphalt overlay program for 2024. So that does impact the 166 or so lane kilometers that are currently in the reconstruct categories. They'll continue to receive pothole patching as necessary. But it is a kind of more of a level of service question there. Our asphalt overlay is a little bit of a Band-Aid. We expect to get about a service life of anywhere from 5 to 8 years out of that. But it does provide an immediate improvement in rideability for residents along those street sections. This program is one that we've eliminated in the past. We brought it back this year. Again, we're going to scale it back or mostly eliminate it in 2024, but we will revisit that if our revenues come in stronger than anticipated. We are taking somewhat of a conservative approach there, especially with building permit revenues. We have baked in some modest enhancements to the maintenance of uptown brick sidewalks and medians. I will highlight as well here some challenges that we've had here with filling of positions this year. It's certainly not like it was. We're not getting the candidate pool that we are used to. So we're having to dig much deeper to get casuals. Even after we interview them and extend offers, we're seeing people take positions elsewhere. There is also kind of a bit of a shortage in resources to support our efforts in hiring in corporate services. So the net result of that is that we're able to bring on our casuals much later than we would like, much later than in previous years. For context, we try to resource up for construction season, usually in April or May at the latest. We want to have all our people on board. Here we are now near the end of June, and we are still short somewhere around 12 employees between Parks and Works. So that is certainly challenging because the work is here and we need to get that done. So the next budget I'll touch on is snow control. So again, there's a modest variance from last year into this one. I'll highlight just 2 items on this one. First, we are anticipating some new trucks to arrive and be put in service at some point over the next month or 2. Normally, we would take the old equipment and send that to auction. What we anticipate doing this time around is we're going to retain some pieces of equipment just to make sure we have equipment ready to go when winter storms do come. Otherwise, that's entire routes that are not being manned in the height of the storm, and it does certainly impact our ability to meet service level standards. Right now, just on service level standards, we have not made any adjustments yet. Certainly, you'll recall with sustainability, we did make a significant number of adjustments. We sent something like 11 pieces of heavy equipment to auction. And, we've we've had a couple seasons under our belt since then. We've not made any official adjustments to service level standards, but we do fear that if we do get back into quote unquote normal winter conditions, we will struggle to meet current service levels. So traditionally every year before the winter really gets going in earnest, we do come before council, of course, to provide an update on our plans. We'll revisit our service level standards before that point, but we are waiting to see the impact of some things, including the negotiations on the extended producer responsibility program. That will, of course, be very impactful for us. If we do end up opting out, that'll mean up to 8 employees that we're able to redeploy into other operations, including snow control into winter. So if that were to end up being the case, then we would feel comfortable maintaining those standards as is. So again, some adjustments to the solid waste management service. We are, of course, just we're about 6 or 8 months into our new WasteWise program with the carts, with the curbside collection, with the bag tag system. And, you know, we are making a few adjustments for the budget in 2024, the most significant of which is we're looking at the amortization schedule of our garbage trucks. We are using those not quite 24 hours a day, but they're getting used for a full day shift. That same equipment is getting used again at nighttime to enable the recycling collection. So we originally amortized those trucks over a 14-year period. We're shortening that amortization schedule in half, and we're plowing more money into our fleet reserve to make sure we're in a position to replace those trucks much, much earlier than we otherwise would have. The impact from that adjustment alone is over $300,000. On the revenue side, we are projecting lower bag tag revenues, again, approximately $200,000 less than what's in our 2023 budget. But again, we kind of, it's a wash for us a little bit because that means people are putting out less waste. And that means that'll translate into lower tipping fees as well from the landfill. So my last note is just about the extended producer responsibility program. Again, we will be back in front of council later in July with a recommendation on that. That could certainly be impactful for us. On the Parks and Rec side of things, we have a variance from 2023 into 2024 of about $380,000 or so. We have built in some additional resources for harbor passage extensions and some of those other parks capital investments that are planned throughout 2023. You know, we certainly have had our staffing challenges, not only the reduction in resources, the loss of about 5 permanent employees there, but also the staffing challenges that we're seeing here have made it very challenging for us to maintain adequate levels of service in our parks, tourist attractions, and rec facilities. So we're going to be monitoring that quite closely. And again, we'll look for the impacts of that ERP program, which may provide part of the solution. But I think we need to look at the budget overall before we finalize this and make sure we're resourced to deliver services that are on par with what the community is expecting. No significant changes are anticipated for the parking, both on-street and off-street areas. I alluded to some increases that we are budgeting for currently in terms of both residential parking permits, off-street parking monthly passes, as well as for ticket revenues. The ticket revenues was one that was discussed during the sustainability initiatives, and we've just been delayed rolling that out due to some technology challenges associated with the cyber attack recovery. We'll be looking at those rates and those revenue impacts in more detail with a parking study that we have planned for this year for the South Central Peninsula. That will also look at other potential changes to things like our alternate side parking regimen in the uptown, the calling of parking bans during the winter, and other elements. So just some minor adjustments to some of our other services with rural stormwater and fleet services and inventory management. So again, just following on that trend, we are getting away from some of our preventative maintenance programs, and we're moving more towards our reactive system of maintenance, which is less than ideal, I'll call it. I'll say that on the reactive front as well, it is a relatively low level of service currently. If there are, priority one work requests, our target right now is to get those done in one full construction season. So that's not a high level of service. Lower priority work requests, we don't have any particular associated service level. Essentially, those get done either through overlap with our PM programs or if we're doing other reactive maintenance in the area at the time. So I will just highlight that that's a bit of a risk that council should be aware of, that the further we get away from these proactive maintenance programs, the inspection, maintenance of some of these key storm channels, that may lead to an increased risk of flooding in the future. In terms of proposed service enhancements, again, these would not be included in the base budget before you. But our first priority, if we do find ourselves in a position of being able to reinvest, one of our first priorities would be to shore up existing service levels, to improve consistency, to make sure those service levels meet community needs. We'll also need to work closely with support services, especially on the timely hiring of seasonal staff. It's a big difference if we're getting, a couple dozen people in June or July as opposed to April or May timeframe. So, those delays certainly become challenging. And I guess I would highlight that's not only a resource issue. It is just a reflection of the overall labor market as well. People have a lot more options, and it seems like a lot of other organizations in the public sector elsewhere and in the private sector are competing much more aggressively for talent. And we used to be the employer of choice for a lot of these folks. That's less so the case now. So we do see delays in that hiring. We would suggest an increased budget for traffic safety enhancements. We've talked with Public Safety Committee and Council at various times about the large backlog of work requests there for, crosswalk enhancements, speeding issues on residential streets. So there are hundreds of those that are backlogged. Now, we did take a good step forward this year with the hiring of a half an FTE for a traffic engineer to help us manage those requests and analyze those requests. We did also build in a modest budget of $75,000 to help us implement solutions to that. But certainly there is still a big need, and I think there's a good tie-in with council priorities as well. So we'd love to enhance that for 2024. On the bylaw front, we do have a number of bylaws that our service area is responsible for, a growing list of them, including the flyer bylaw that was introduced recently. At the current time, enforcement of those bylaws is not our first priority, and it's typically done off the corner of someone's desk. I think to look at an overall corporate approach to enforcing those bylaws with a centralized area, dedicated resource, I think will go a long ways. There's a few more there that are more minor, but those are certainly enhancements that we would like to see in terms of our service delivery. Some of the other ones, again, you know, we've been in front of council several times to talk about the impact from rail traffic. That's going to be even more important for our community as the port modernization project drives even more rail traffic through our community. That will have impacts for us in terms of delays at crossings. It'll have impacts for our citizens near those crossings in terms of increased whistling. So one of the things that we've talked about is the need to really review those rail traffic regulations and to see if we can beef those up, take some best practices from other jurisdictions, and certainly some consulting resources to enable an environmental scan and to help us formulate that approach would be helpful for us. The next two are just some specific examples of how our current resources are stretched to meet our current service obligations. So, you know, again, Harbor Passage crews and Rockwood Park's maintenance crews have been cut in half over the last number of years. And I think, you know, the impacts from that are starting to show. You know, we have some improvements planned for the Reversing Falls area with the 14.5 cafe, with some future plans to extend Harbor Passage in that area. All that is going to work to increase traffic, and we do need to make sure we have an adequate level of service in that location. The other potential enhancements I would like to just put out there for consideration at this point is increasing a budget for more tree planting and tree maintenance. You know, we used to, a number of years ago, we had a dedicated budget of around $80,000 annually to support the planting of new trees. That has been entirely removed. In the latter part of last year, we did actually put in some funding applications to support planting of new trees, but we have yet to hear. So we'll be chasing that, but that's a good opportunity there. And on the tree maintenance side of things, we do have a backlog of roughly 100 work requests where, you know, street trees or other trees on public property are in need of maintenance, and we only have a small crew that works during the construction season to tackle those. So an enhancement there, I think, would help us close that gap. And with that, I will turn it back to the chair, subject to any questions that there may be.
Thank you, Commissioner Hugenholtz. First, to turn it over to the committee. Councillor Radwin, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I think Mayor had her hand up first, if you want to go there.
Go ahead.
That's okay. You're center square on my screen, Councillor Radwin. So
okay, yeah, great. I have a couple of questions. So I'm just wondering, Commissioner Hugenholtz, if you can give me an idea of how large is the backlog of the traffic calming requests that you're getting? I know at one point I heard around 450 requests in, but has it gotten any better? Is it a longer list?
Yeah, good question, Councillor. And that backlog would measure in the hundreds. It would be on par with what we had communicated, I think, at a meeting of Public Safety Committee last year. I believe Tim O'Reilly's on the line, and if he You know, I'm not sure if we have an exact number for you, but it is significant. Tim?
Yeah, I just reference our typical number of requests per year for traffic calming is about 20. That's increased fivefold in the last number of years, so 5 times that number of requests.
I know I'm feeling it with my phone calls. So yeah, for sure. The other question that I have, I think, is actually for Commissioner Hossack, if she's there. So it's about staffing. I know that just, you know, from being in the community and having my business, I still have tons of students coming in looking for work. And so I'm just wondering if we have gotten a chance to reaching out to Working New Brunswick to get job postings out at the Newcomer Center, YMCA, Prude. And I know that UNB and NBCC will post jobs in their organizations. I don't know if we already do that or not. And I'm wondering if there's any opportunity to maybe even go into the campuses, because UNB would probably be the ideal candidates where they're coming out. Commissioner Hugenholtz mentioned better to get people out sooner. Well, they're out of school after April, you know, where NBCC is longer. And the only other thing I was thinking is, have we ever thought of having a referral program?
Good afternoon.
Lots of questions. Sorry.
Yes, I'll try to address a few of your questions, Councillor, as I move through. The student positions, they're not as many as there are casual positions. The student positions were actually filled quite quickly, and whether they be high school, college, university students, because they're only available for certain periods of time. The positions that Commissioner Hugenholtz referenced are more the casual positions that may range from April till October. And we've seen a shift there. He needs them for a little bit longer of a period because of the seasons. So yes, we've reached out to several different agencies. We're working with different agencies. We're working on where we're putting our postings. We're updating job postings. We did have a significant amount of casual work, over 100 positions. So in order to fill over 100 positions, that takes a considerable amount of time. So the number is very, very high, with only one person designated full-time to staffing. So yes, we're trying to work with those agencies, and most of them that you have mentioned, we also post and have our postings out in many places. So we do encourage people to monitor our website, monitor Career Beacon, and we're trying to make as many contacts as we can in the community to share our job postings as well.
Okay, so I mean, but you're probably still not getting applications. So have we ever considered, I mean, and obviously you would need people power to do this, but a referral program for staff?
We do not have a referral program for staff at this time. It is something we could certainly look at, and we are definitely getting applications. It just, in order to hire that many people, you have to go through a lot of applications. And unfortunately, this year we did see some people, once they were selected, decline the opportunities as well, which we haven't seen in the past. And it's not just us, it's everybody. It's the new, it seems to be in the new world out there. So we're trying to shift as quickly as possible that so that we can make those changes. But we certainly would appreciate staff making referrals and posting and passing on the information as well.
I know how much time I take to hire 3 people. It's quite time consuming. So I totally appreciate you having more of a need for staffing. And, you know, I'd just like to really say that I think that I can probably speak very, you know, for most businesses. I know that JDI would probably agree, because I see them at the job fairs too, that without tapping into our new residents coming in, we wouldn't be able to fill these jobs. We're kind of at that point now. So if we're not tapping into newcomers, we're not getting our jobs filled.
Yeah, no, we certainly are. And we're also looking at new software as well for electronic reference checking, and trying to change some of our software to become more efficient as well.
Well,
yes, I agree.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys and your work too.
Thanks, Councillor. Your Worship, over to you.
Thank you. You've got a big portfolio there with a lot of work in it, Mike. And I know that you had lost staff when we did the cutbacks there a couple of years ago, but is there, are we going to be looking at replacing some of that full-time staff going forward?
Well, that's not what's in the budget before you. It's largely a status quo, so there are no other adjustments to full-time employees. I think there are a number of things corporate-wide that we need to sort of work through over the next few years that may impact our needs on, both in terms of permanent employees and casual employees. And I think, frankly, it's a longer term strategic decision about how we resource up in some of these areas. Like it may, we may have to look at various options to deliver that service to the public, whether through partnerships, contracting, or our employees. I think we'll have to look at all of those possibilities.
Okay, sounds good. I guess that's what I'm really looking at is what's the long-term plan like as we go forward to try to build up some of those services again, because when I go through this, I mean, it seems like it's always all the goodies, that get the loss of money. I mean, we've got, I think you said at one time, 600 kilometers of roads. So if we were doing somewhere around 50, you'd have almost 1/10 of your roads done. But, there's all those roads don't have tax base on them. And I know there are indicators other than the pavement index of, why we would do a road. I think, being a bus route, it should be part of the tax base that's on it, et cetera, as we go forward. But I'm not surprised, I guess, to hear about traffic calming because there are more people now that want to do more active transportation. And so, and I guess we need to somehow shift our thinking towards that as much as we can, but still try to keep what we need for roads going in the meantime. I'll be curious about the parking study as well. I'm all for parking bans and alternate side parking. I love it. And the Councillor Radwan had mentioned about partnering, and I know ACAP was giving out trees maybe last year or the year before. So it's tricky in the city because I can't just say, come and, I'll plant a tree because I don't know what's under on the ground in the city, whereas in other places. So it'd be nice if we had some sort of an opportunity to know, or a map. I guess if a tree was there, I could put one there maybe, but if we could, with that partnership, link with someone so that we could get the trees, but then I need to know where it can go. So anyways, all good. Appreciate all the work. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor Hickey, to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a comment more than anything, Mike, and I think it's something that we'll see as we go through this process with Shape Your City, and then further discussions as we move through this process. Really, I think a lot of these enhancements are important and valuable to consider. I know, we make reference a lot to being growth ready and how we're positioning ourselves to be growth ready. And I think a lot of these enhancements are going to be important and impactful on that. And really an adjustment for a lot of folks around this table of thinking, certainly I know for me, an adjustment in thinking from one that was more focused on building the financial plan, and now I think it's really important that it's both following the financial plan, but then using that to drive success as well. And for me, that looks like, making sure that we're giving as much credence as we can to these enhancements so that we are growth ready and so that we are better positioned to be able to both respond throughout the year to situations, but also better equipped to have the long-term planning that doesn't put us in positions where we're making decisions about, enhancing flower distribution or enhancing maintenance programs midway through the year. That we really make sure that we have the planning and the like I said, the enhancements in place that make us successful early on. I think it'll be an interesting process going forward, and I think we're in store for some important decisions.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Radwan, I see your hand up again. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just thought I'd bring it up since Mayor Reardon kind of mentioned this. I've had some meetings with staff and ACAP about tree planting, and I really wanted to try to get some trees planted around Glen Falls area. They've done a bit of work over there already. They have some asks in for tree planting for this year, as well as city staff has a ask like Commissioner Hugenholtz mentioned. They're also going to be applying to another foundation to see if we could get some trees donated to ACAP for Glen Falls, and staff have done a great job of giving them access to tools that will help them know what is in the ground in certain areas, so that they're not planting trees too close to like sewer and water lines and things like that. So it's great when you partner with these people that have like 350 volunteers that love to go plant trees, and it beautifies the community. It also helps with flood mitigation. But the other thing, just so that you know, it also will help us with our strategic plan, is it tends to put about 20% of an increase in your tax base growth. So really, really important. Anyway, I'm looking forward to these, hopefully these pockets of money getting approved so we can get more trees in the city.
Thanks, Councillor. Go ahead, Councillor Norton. Go ahead. You're on mute, Councillor Norton.
Thank you for making me audible. Mike, anything coming by way of recommendations to council for bylaw enforcement that we're otherwise taxed with?
Yeah, I think, no firm plans right now. Certainly, we do enjoy a good, close relationship with our general counsel's office.
Yeah.
And we rely on them heavily to support any actions we do take on the bylaw enforcement side of things. I think we're very strong enforcing, on the parking side through our commissionaires that we have there. We do good enforcement, good strong enforcement on meter violations, traffic bylaw infractions. There are other areas, however, where I think we could benefit, the community could benefit from some enhanced enforcement. Things like, businesses that, fill in sidewalks when they're plowing their lots or park on the sidewalks. There are some areas where I think we could benefit from an enhanced focus. We haven't entirely figured that out in this budget. We don't have a solution yet. But I think, some changes in the GCO's office and potentially, seeing how this budget ends up overall, I think it's worthwhile taking an overall look at bylaw enforcement, not just in our specific service area, but across the board as a community.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning that. I guess, just spitballing thoughts, and whether that looks like a bit of a civilian job, whether that's commissionaires or whether that's more integration between police, parking, etc., or whether it's its own standalone unit underneath our respective commissioners' umbrella. I look forward to looking for a better way to provide enforcement for the long list of bylaws that we have that otherwise don't get enforced, and then create frustration for constituents that would cite a bylaw but nobody to enforce it. And if it's worth the drafting, then it's worth the enforcement. And so I'm glad that all that to say, Commissioner, I'm glad that you highlight it, and it's an area where we need to improve, and we're looking for ways to do that. And whether that's through public safety or whether that's through council, full confidence in bringing something forward where council can support to better provide enforcement for really an A to Z list of bylaws that we have out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Norton. I'll pile on with the bylaw enforcement. I certainly get frustrated when I'm driving around in the winter and see nicely plowed sidewalks that have big piles at the ends of driveways blocking them off, and all the work that we've done basically has been undone by somebody not following up. And I know we don't do a great job. We don't do a good job. We may not do a job right now of enforcing that bylaw. And what's the sense in putting in the work if we're just going to let somebody undo the work? So I'll pile on with that one. A couple of questions for you, Commissioner. We did ask for a status quo budget, and I know you mentioned that apart from inflationary adjustments, it's mostly a status quo budget, but it seems to be highlighted in your presentation. A lot of things have been reduced. Is that a reduction over last year or a reduction over the way we used to do things? Because then it's not if it's reductions over last year, it's really not a status quo budget.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Chair, and I guess I alluded to that initially. Is that really this is the first time since we undertook the sustainability initiatives that we've been back to talk about some of the service impacts from some of those adjustments. So that's mainly what I'm referring to is the overall impacts from the last few years. From 2023 into next year, the differences are much more minor. Again, one I would highlight would be on the overlay program. Just to balance the dollars and cents of it, we have had to scale that back considerably. But I would make the connection to some of our revenue projections, which we feel are quite conservative, which I think we should be budgeting conservatively, but if they do come back more healthy than we anticipated, I think we could look at select reintroduction of some programs, and overlay may be one, because again, it's if you're on one of those streets that needs reconstruction, an overlay program may not be a long-term solution, but it's a significant improvement in rideability that's going to last for, like I say, anywhere from 5 to 8 years. So, understood. I have so enjoyed my drive along Adelaide Street to St. John High School in the mornings over the last week or two. Yes, for sure. No, thank you for that, because that's important. That before the sustainability $10 million structural budget wrestling that we did, that it is a status quo budget except for the overlay program, which I'm glad you mentioned that, because that leads me into my next question. We handled asphalt very differently this year than some of our partnered regional neighbors, Quispam, Sis, and Rothesay, who chose, because of the inflationary pressures, just to say, we're going to skip it this year. It's costing way too much. And we handled it with a combination of prudence and reserves and setting a plan forward, if, deferring certain things. Like we looked at it in a very strategic way. But all of those, whether it's the strategic way we looked at it, deferring the way Quispam and Rothesay looked at it, if those inflationary pressures don't change, like if it's not a blip and they stay there, would you see us looking at doing those things differently? Because I certainly understand the pressure from the inflation on asphalt is making it very difficult to do everything else, because I think that was the 27% number you brought up. That makes it really tough to do other things. Can you speak to that? Yeah, I'd love to. It's a great question. It's one that we're watching with concern, and frankly, we've not been able to keep up with the inflationary pressures over the last several years on asphalt and on our resurfacing program. So on resurfacing, it's a big number, between what we budget in operating and what we budget in capital. We're like, for 2024, I think we're sitting at just under $9 million combined. You start thinking about a 27% increase on that, and it's like it can blow away any of the other things that we're talking about. And it's a place where cuts are not really sustainable over the long term, because our entire approach here is not based on service levels or trying to set some kind of a gold service level. It's entirely driven by asset management considerations. What we're trying to do is make sure we manage the life of those assets to make sure we catch it before it falls into that more expensive reconstruct category. that's been driving all our investment decisions. And really the amounts that we've been seeing through our tenders, it's driven by a couple things. One is the price of the commodity itself has increased significantly, but also the overall tendering and construction environment in our community and many others is really out of balance right now. If you talk to consultants, contractors, everybody's very busy. They can pick and choose what projects they want to do, and they can kind of put in their own number for it. Like you mentioned, some of those impacts, I suspect, are temporary. I do have some expectation that things are going to settle back down into normal, we'll call it, in future years. Whether that's in 2024 or 2025, I'm not sure. It certainly could put us in a position to make difficult decisions between now and then.
Thank you for that. And team, Commissioner and I didn't rehearse this beforehand, but you've led me into my final question really well. Given that those inflationary pressures are so high in that particular service, how long has it been since we did an analysis of whether we should be contracting it out, or are the prices now at the point where we should be looking at bringing it in-house? We do roads every year. And I know a while ago there was an analysis done, and it was more efficient to contract out the street reconstruction. With pricing like this, are we due to have another study?
Probably is the short answer. It was looked at in some level of detail probably just over 10 years ago now, 10, 11 years ago. I know at the time it strongly pointed to, a status quo, basically doing it as a contract service. I think that's where almost all the municipalities in the province are at too, and across the country. It's very rare to see a municipality in the business of asphalt and resurfacing. There are some considerable equipment investments that need to be made, and once you have your capital tied up, you'll want to get as much return out of that as possible. So, if you're, as a municipality, we'd be more or less just bidding our own work, which can vary year to year, but it's not like contractors who can bid on work all across the community and in other communities. So there's a certain scale I think that they might enjoy, but given the pressures, I think it's certainly worth looking at and staying open to those possibilities. At the end of the day, we want to make sure we deliver value to our citizens. And if that means trying to, see if it makes sense to get in the business ourselves, then that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, and I guess I would suggest it's at least worth looking at what it would cost us to look at it, because I'm certainly empathetic to a lot of the things you've mentioned that I would love to see us get back to, and then I keep coming back to that 8.6% number, and I know that 8.6% number is so driven by that 27% number. Mm-hmm. So I think it's worth a look, because I think a lot of different things are going into that 27% number, and if there's anything that we can have control over to bring more value to the citizen while getting the same level of service, to let us do some other things, I think we need to be looking for all sorts of efficiencies. Thanks very much for your presentation, Commissioner. Mr. Levine, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to also highlight the fact that this has been a great discussion, particularly around service levels and stuff. And I think that's why, as CFO Fudge has alluded to, bringing back the service-based budget process after the summer is going to be critically important for the members here to understand what is their current service levels today, and do you want to increase it, decrease it, but you need to establish that baseline, which has probably changed since we did a big reorganization. So, lots more to come to help feed some of that decision making. So just really wanted to highlight that point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And this is all a receive and file?
Yes, it is.
At this point, so Councillor Radwin and Councillor Hickey on the receive and file. All in favor, raise your hand, signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, and carried. And the last piece for this meeting is 6.4, which is the 2024 operating budget, public engagement, shape your budget, verbal update.
Perfect.
Is there a slide or is it?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. So just really good news. We are ready to launch. We actually, the website is live. And if you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, so if you go into your Shape Your City, click that, and you're going to go into this website, and Shape Your Budget is live. I really just wanted to let the Finance Committee know that comms will be rolling something out tomorrow, a communication, and to let everybody know that it's up. It's running. The link will be on there, so we're excited to have it up and running. So, you know, I know that some of our service areas here have been already on there filling in the survey to try to get some of their service enhancements, but that's okay. We can get those guys out. But anyways, it's up and running, and like I said, comms will be coming out with an announcement tomorrow, and we're up and running.
Exciting stuff. Thank you. So just before we wrap up, you know, this was kind of the link meeting. It makes sense at the end of June when we're halfway through the year. We had the wrap up of a clean audit from 2022 that showed, you know, a balanced budget and a clean audit. And then with 6 months left in this year, we've started in earnest creating budget for 2024. So a great discussion. Thank you to all of the service areas that came presented and had a good first go of question and answers, because this conversation will continue at our next finance meeting, and then we will have everybody back. This is the numbers part, very similar to last year. One of the add-ons, though, is the service-based budget part of it that will come back later in the summer, early fall, when we see what the numbers will mean with regards to services to help inform our decisions. And finally, as part of that budget process and public engagement, we would invite everybody in St. John to visit stjohn.ca and get into Shape Your Budget. More information will be coming out tomorrow. If you happen to be watching us today, but you don't like computers and hitting buttons, paper copies of Shape Your Budget will be available at the Customer Service Center. And I'm sure if you contact us at the city, we will find a way to get you a paper copy so you can participate. Thank you to the committee, as always, for being the gatekeepers of our financial plan, but also contributing as we do our budget work and our audit work. And today was a good example. I say every time that finance isn't just about our crackerjack finance department, but it's about all of the staff at the city. And today was a great example of that, from the police force, who's at arm's length, but we have their budget, through to the roads that we drive on and everything in between. So thanks to everybody for participating. And I'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Hickey, Councillor Norton. We're adjourned. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.